You know, I talk a lot about having coffee in the woods, and I'm sure to some people I come across as some type of a coffee snob. And guilty, yeah, I like a good cup of coffee, and I will go the extra mile to make a good cup of coffee. And I've shown in some of my earliest videos how I roast beans in the woods. But, you know, I've never shown how I roast beans at home. Now, full disclosure, I don't do this all the time. Most of the time I'll buy a Starbucks or another brand of coffee. Actually, I'll show you the brand of coffee I use most often. But occasionally I'll roast from green beans here at home to have a nice cup of coffee. Or if I'm going into the woods and I want to have an ultra fresh cup of coffee but don't want to go through the roasting process while I'm in the woods, I'll roast them here at home. Let me show you the method I use. Okay, so there's no real magic to how I roast coffee. It's just a very simple process. You only need a couple of things. So I use a popcorn popper, and the one I use is a popcorn pumper brand name. And I picked this up at Value Village for, well, let's see if you can see this or not, $3.99. So that made it very economical to have. You do or should have some type of a strainer or other. You could use a bowl, a metal bowl will work. But what you're going to use this for is after the coffee is roasted, it will continue to roast even when you turn the popcorn popper off. So you need some way of shaking it and just cooling it down quickly. And of course, you need coffee beans. So here's the coffee beans I'm using today. And these are green beans intended for roasting. This is a Sumatra coffee. And we've talked at some length about different types of coffee before, but just quickly, a Sumatra bean is grown in Sumatra, and it prefers to be roasted to a darker full city roast. That's a very dark, oily bean. So the different beans from around the world, it is not necessarily the brand or where the bean comes from that tells you whether or not it's going to be a dark coffee. It's actually how long and how it's been roasted. It's just that some beans prefer to have a different roast than others. A Colombia bean, for instance, likes to have a light to a medium roast. An Ethiopian bean likes to have a light to a medium roast. And when I say likes to have it, that's where its flavor potential is in those roasts. So you can go from a very light roast to a very dark roast with any bean that you use, simply by how long you leave it in whatever roasting device you have, and in this case the popcorn popper. So my process is pretty simple. I'll take some green beans. Let me show you a few green beans to start. So there are the green beans, and that's all they are. They're exactly that, green coffee beans. And they're denser and heavier than our fully roasted coffee beans. And I'm going to give you a side-by-side comparison once this is done to show you what the before and after looks like. But for me, open the top of the lid off, and you can see there's no preciseness to this. It's all a matter of experience and guesswork, to be honest. I'll pour a few beans in, maybe half a cup or so. I'll show you in a second what my guide is, but once I start, the popcorn maker is going to make a considerable amount of noise, so it may be a little bit difficult for you to hear me. But there's the beans inside the popcorn maker. And what happens is when I plug it in and the popcorn maker starts working, it starts to swirl the beans around. Now, you could go so far as to add just enough beans so that the swirling is very slow. It will speed up as the beans become lighter, and that's what happens as they heat up and as they roast. They do become lighter and they'll swirl faster. You don't want so many beans in the popcorn maker that they don't move when you plug it in. Otherwise you'll get the burns on the beans on the bottom burning, and the beans on the top won't get any heat at all. So they do have to be kept in motion. That's one of the key things about roasting coffee, is that the beans have to be always in motion over the heat. Alright, so put the lid on. Actually, I won't put the lid on until I show you the beans in motion. I'll plug this in. Now, I'm not going to let this run the full time, but I will give you a little bit of an update as I go along. There we go. Now hopefully you can see the beans moving around in there. I can add a few more beans to that. And they're just barely moving now, which is fine. All right, let me back away from that. Okay, like I said, there's no real secret to how this is going to work. You could use a precise time on this. I don't think there's any formula, because what I found is I'm roasting outdoors. You really want to do this outdoors. You can do it indoors. I've done it indoors. I've done it on top of my stovetop with the range hood going full blast. but still there's going to be an intense roasting of coffee smell all through the house, and it's going to last for at least a day. So if you can do this outdoors, you're much better off. One of the variations, of course, is the temperature. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Halifax, about 22 degrees Celsius, a very light breeze, and that's not bad. Now, the roasting will go faster because of that, but I've done this in the winter when it's been like -5, -10 degrees Celsius, and it'll roast. It just takes a little longer. So I don't use time so much as I use color, and that's what we're going to use today, is the color of the beans, and I'll show you what I mean as we go along. So as the beans start to move, and you're looking at the popcorn maker right now, you're starting to see little flecks of brown dust floating out of it. And that's the husk on the outside of the bean starting to come off as it moves, and as the bean starts to expand, it cracks the husk and the husk will come off, and this is going to fly all over the end, all over the yard here. You'll see little bits of this flying out. That'll take a few minutes. A little further on, the beans will go into what's known as first crack. So that's the first change in the beans as they go from that green state to a darker state. And I'm going to show you as I go the color differences in the beans. But the first crack is the earliest point at which the coffee starts to really make a significant change internally. A few minutes later, they go into second crack. Now, what I mean by crack, it's an actual popping noise. Now, it doesn't pop open like popcorn does. You don't see a significant change in size, at least not right away. In the end, you'll see a change in the size of the beans. But early on, you'll hear the cracking noise, and it's more of a pop, pop, pop noise. When it gets into second crack, as it's called, it's a lighter snapping noise, and hopefully we'll be able to capture that on camera. It's a little difficult to do over the sound of the popcorn maker. But overall, this is probably going to take me the better part of 10 minutes to get it to the roast that I like. I like somewhere between a dark roast and a full city roast. Not so far gone that all you taste is the burnt taste of a burnt coffee bean, but darker than a medium roast with a little bit more body to it. All right, what I'll do is I'm going to stop the camera now, and as I move along a little bit, I'll show you an update as we go, because like I said, this is going to take about 10 minutes to go from green to fully roasted. Now hopefully you can hear me over the sound of the popcorn maker. I removed the top so that you can see the beans as they're moving around. Already they've gone from that green color to a light brown color. You can see the husks continue to come off. So this has been about 3 minutes into the total time that the popcorn maker's been plugged in. And I'll give you an update a little as it gets closer to the color I like. Okay, we're about 3 or 4 more minutes after the last update. You can see the beans are moving much more vigorously because they're expanding in size and they're getting lighter in weight. In fact, they're getting so vigorous now and they're starting to fill the chamber up that I tilted the popcorn maker back just a tiny bit. Otherwise, I start to lose beans. And I'm gonna there goes one now. I'm gonna have to put the cover back on, but hopefully, I'm not sure if you can hear this. It's unlikely you can. But we're now into second crack, and anytime the second crack starts, you can stop the beans, cool them off, and grind them or keep them for use. So wait until second crack. All right, I'm going to put the cover back on before I lose any more. Now, how long do you roast the beans? I would encourage you to experiment with this, quite honestly. I like a darker roast, you may not. You may like a lighter roast. So anytime after you hear that second crack, and it is distinct, once you try this, you'll hear it. You can stop the roasting process, put them in some type of a sieve or bowl to cool them off, and they're ready for use. I encourage you to try different colors and different variations to see what you like the best with different beans. There certainly is an art and a science to roasting coffee, and this is the art part. What beans you're going to use, how dark you want to roast them, what the weather conditions are like, even the method of roasting. A slow to medium fast roast, the type of roasting you're going to do will make a difference as opposed to you doing this in a cast iron frying pan over the coals of a fire, which I think I will show at another time. I have shown that in a previous video of an alcohol stove, but I think in another video I'll show it done in a cast iron fry pan over the coals of a fire. It's just a matter of color, and that's where the experience comes in. I can't give you precise times. So we are getting closer. I don't know if you can see the smoke rising off of the beans now, but there is a strong, intense coffee flavor going through the neighborhood. Right now, it's actually quite nice. They're getting darker, and I will show you at the last minute, just as I turn the popcorn maker off and put them in the sieve. They will go from a dark, and then they will start to change slightly. You'll get an oily sheen on the outside, and that's about where I like to stop, is just as the oily sheen is starting to come, because that's where it's going from dark roast into full city roast. Okay, I'll show you when I'm just finishing this up and putting them in the sieve. All right, I like the color of the beans that they are right now. I'm going to dump them into the sieve and you'll be able to see this. Hopefully you can see the beans now. If you want them to stop roasting right away, you need to cool them down as quickly as possible. Hopefully you can see that. So I'll show you them in a minute when I compare them against the green bean as well. So that's just short of a full city roast. Maybe a little lighter than I normally would roast them, but still looks like a nicely roasted bean. So I'll shake them like this until I can pick them up in my hands. If you tried right now, you'd burn your fingers. All right, let me bring it back when I'm finished doing this, and I'll show you what they look like against the green bean. All right, so I've finished roasting that first amount of green beans into a dark roast, not quite a full city roast. So on the left are the original green beans, and on the right are the beans I just roasted. They have a slightly oily appearance to them, and that will actually increase as they start to cool down. The more the oils will come out of the beans and rise to the surface of the bean, and they become quite shiny. But you can see how much larger they are in size. That's a better comparison of full-size bean. So they've close to double in size from what they were originally. They're lighter and larger, and that's the roasting process. Okay, let's close up. All right, so why bother roasting green beans? You can go to the store and you can buy some coffee beans that are already ground, or if you have a grinder at home, you're going to grind them up at home, and you're going to get a good cup of coffee, no question. Nicer if you can grind it at home, nicer yet if you can grind them while they're in the woods. So why even bother going from the green beans? Probably first and foremost is flavor. If you have never done this or never had anybody do it for you, take the green bean from that stage to a full roast, to grind it and making a pot of coffee. You really don't know the full depth of coffee flavors that you can get from them. Yes, you do have to experiment until you find the one you like, but once you do, it'll spoil you. It really will. But there's another very compelling reason for roasting from green beans. 1 pound of green beans costs between $7 and $8 here in Halifax. 1 pound of roasted coffee from Starbucks is about $18. There's a significant cost difference. Yes, I do have to take the time to roast it. I can only roast in small quantities. I can't do a full pound all at once. But the end product makes the time invested well worthwhile. You saw what I paid for the popcorn maker. Even if I bought it brand new, it would be less than $20. And that's all you really need to make roasted coffee at home. But do it outdoors, trust me. So try it. I think I'd encourage you to try it. Experiment with it. It's not a big investment. If you don't like it, well, all right. It's not a bad waste of money. You can still use the popcorn maker for popcorn. The wind's blowing my coffee off the table. All right, until next time, get out and explore. And if you've enjoyed this video, maybe you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Hopefully I'll bring you other good tips and useful information you can use. Take the path less traveled. It'll make all the difference. Bye for now.